Greetings. Today we'll be evaluating the 1965 Teisco Checkmate 17 amp. Made in Japan. It is a pretty slick little amp and very affordable. I know we'd all love to be filling our music rooms with Fender Tremoluxes and dual professionals, but there are some of us that just don't have unlimited bank accounts and outrageous good luck. So we content ourselves with more let's say normal amps, okay, and this is one of them. When I first got it, both the reverb and the tremolo didn't work, which is kind of typical on these, I guess. I'm going to tell you how I fixed them. Also, we're going to take a close look inside. I'm going to tell you where you can get a schematic. They're pretty elusive on these, and we'll look at the schematic and discuss it. The back door is not original. I fabricated this because the back door were missing. Actually, there were two back doors, an upper rectangle and a lower rectangle, which were, in my opinion, exactly the wrong place. The upper one made the tubes heat up. It was open in the middle, and there was nothing for the speaker to resonate against. So I built this back door out of masonite and took that opportunity to design one that I thought would work better. And it really does seem to. It works very well. Okay, next step, let's pull the back off of this beast, take a look inside, see what makes it tick, and figure out what we can do to make it work when it doesn't. Okay, so stick around. We'll be right back. Okay, here I've got the back of this little beast. We can glimpse in at the top of the top-mounted chassis and see all the electrical components. Got the original transformers. I added this. This is a speaker jack in which you can plug in the cabinet speaker, unplug it, and then plug in speaker cabinets or any other speaker you want to use the amp with. It's similar to what I've seen on some Fender amps. Tubes each have these little spring retainers that hold them in place. Very nicely designed, very simple, and they really work. We got two 12AX7s, a 6X4, and a 7189A output tube. Got the original 10-inch, 8-ohm, 20-watt musical amplifier speaker with a nice Alnico magnet. Original cone. Works like a charm. On the right side over here we have a tag in which every step of the production process is written down, and the person who's responsible for the work had to sign their name. Now, I shudder to think what would happen if about a dozen of these showed up one day at the factory with the defects in the same area. And I'm thinking Mr. Fuboda or someone else is probably in big trouble. I think it's a really neat idea. It holds the employees responsible for the work, and those of us who have been burned on new guitars that had flaws might like to see a process like this take effect here. So we could go find Mr. Fuboda ourselves. Okay, on the other side, we've got an import tag. It describes what it is, that it's a Checkmate 17, what the serial number is, that it's made in Japan. Okay, all very straightforward. Now, the real bit of humor here is going to be found in the bottom of the case. And that is this oddball, rectangular little metal box. That's the reverb tank. I know you're laughing now, but it actually does work. There's a single spring in there with little piezo crystals on either end. And a piezo crystal, when you apply electricity to it, it vibrates. And when you vibrate it, it produces electricity. So they put one on the left end that drives the spring and one on the right that recovers the signal from it. It actually works. Well, it did when they're new. They generally don't work now. This one didn't work at all, and there were several things I had to do to fix it. I'm going to tell you now, if you're working on one, check this out. Number one, pull off that metal cover, clean all the cat hair and cigarette butts and other god-awful things that have accumulated in and are blocking the spring and keeping it from vibrating freely. Number two, if you look at the metal cover, you'll see that the metal cover here comes very close to the lugs that the signal comes out on. And I found that the metal cover is actually touching the lugs and grounding them. So what I did is I jacked up the case a little bit by putting a rubber washer between the cover and the base. And then I put a little piece of insulation there to protect the lug so that it could not be grounded out. I'm going to bet you, if you're having trouble with your little reverb tank, take a look at that after you've cleaned it and see if you're not grounding out your lugs. The third thing that you have to be careful with on these is that the little tank, because it is not transformer driven, it is tube driven, requires a very strong tube to activate the spring. So I found that I had a good, my 12AX7 that tested out just fine, but it wasn't strong enough. So what it required was a brand new, extremely powerful 12AX7 that once I put in place, I had really nice reverb effect. Well, the best that you could expect from a spring that small, but really very effective reverb. Another little tip. I am not one to tear out components just for the heck of it. I don't go into amps and just rip out all the filter capacitors, resistors, and everything else and put in all new ones. I tend to go in, it takes longer, but I go in and replace the ones that need it. Sadly, in this particular chassis, I had to replace a bunch of resistors and a bunch of capacitors. I'm going to tell you a little secret I found out. It took me a while before I discovered it. I'm going to tip you off right now. One of the problems with this amp, and with a lot of amps I've seen, is when they're idling, they should be dead quiet. Maybe a tiny little bit of a hum, but in this case, there was a bunch of rustling noises in the background. I bet you've heard this, that kind of like you're either frying eggs, there's a sizzling, crackling sound. What it is the carbon resistors, generally the plate resistors, they're 100K resistors, and the carbon has little breaks in it, and the electricity is arcing across there and making sound. Now, you can go in and wholesale replace every resistor in it and probably solve the problem. But I found a better way, and that is get the amp going, get it where it's rustling away, and then spray some of that freezing spray on each resistor. When you hit a resistor that is one of the villains, one of the culprits, the sizzling will stop. If there's two of them doing it, as there were in my case, the sizzling will change. I knew immediately then which resistor I had to replace. You can buy the freezing spray at Radio Shack. It's very expensive, I think, for what you get. I'm sure there's cheaper places, but it worked. And it saved me hours and hours of work. So try the freezer spray on your carbon resistors if you've got a rustling noise in the background. This particular one, I also replaced the filter capacitors because they were leaking and I did have some hum. Okay, I think that pretty well covers the restoration tips on these. What we can do now is take a look at the schematic and see how this beast works from an electronic standpoint. Okay, so stay tuned. Here's a schematic, and tip number one, you'll have no luck at all trying to find on the internet a Checkmate 17 schematic. I didn't. I looked really hard. What I ended up doing in desperation was going through every Teisco schematic that was available on the internet, and the Teisco 10 is exactly the same chassis as the Checkmate 17. So go find a Teisco 10 diagram on the internet. Here's the address if you can read it. That's where I got it and printed it out, and it's very straightforward. We've got the 12AX7, both stages of it used as preamp. We've got the second 12AX7, the first half of it being used to drive the piezo crystals of the reverb tank. No transformer here to drive like we normally see in Fenders. This is a tube-driven piezo reverb. Very strange. This is the other half of that 12AX7 is used as the recovery for the reverb tank and also as the tremolo tube. Okay, pretty crafty. And it really works pretty well. Here we've got the 7189A output tube, not to be confused with a 7189. They have a different internal wiring characteristics so that you have to be very careful. They are not interchangeable. I don't know exactly what would happen if you ran out of 7189As and plugged a 7189 in. It might work one way but not the other. I wouldn't want to find that out. 6x4 rectifier. I changed a couple of the values, not a lot, but I was fairly true to the schematic other than all those pesky resistors I had to change. But anyway, that's it, and hopefully you'll be able to find one too if you need one. Okay, good luck. I'm going to now fix it up, put the back on it, and we're going to check it for its sound. Okay, so stick around. One last thing before we test it for sound. I need to tell you about what to look at if your tremolo isn't working. On the schematic, just be sure that these capacitors are exactly the correct value, and check these resistors. Okay, this resistor to the 1 megs and the 2.01s and the 0.02. Get these, be sure these are exactly right, and I don't mean plus or minus 15% or something like that. Get as close as you can. Okay, and I think you'll find that your tremolo will start working again. I had to replace all 3 to get it to work properly. Maybe you'll be luckier. Anyway, good luck. Now it's time to evaluate the sound quality of the mighty Checkmate 17. I've got the volume on 4, the tone is on 5, reverb and tremolo are turned off. Alrighty, let's try the reverb. We know that with that small tank we're not going to be overwhelmed, but I think we'll get a halfway decent reverb effect out of it. See what you think. Not bad. Now, let's go with the tremolo, which is pretty nice on this amp. Let's run the speed up. I think pretty decent tremolo effect. Well, that's the sound evaluation of the Checkmate 17. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll stay tuned for further evaluations of vintage and classic amplifiers. I really appreciate your time and interest, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.